Good afternoon. Welcome back to our special Facebook Live series called Expert Connections, where we are working to connect you with experts who have answers to questions and resources during the COVID-19 pandemic. My name is Julie Holton. I'm the founder and principal strategist of mConnexions Marketing Agency. Feel free to connect with us using the comments to ask questions and join the conversation. I hope you have your legal questions ready today, because joining me is an attorney from Foster Swift Law Firm, Mike Zahrt. Mike, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So Mike is a business attorney. And of course, Mike, a lot of questions about the Paycheck Protection Program. So that's where I want to start today. What is this Paycheck Protection Program? What do we need to know about this?
Yeah, the Paycheck Protection Program loan, it is a bit of a mouthful. We've been calling it the PPP loan, just to make it easy. It is part of that big $2 trillion stimulus package that got passed about a week and a half ago. And it falls under the 7A SBA loan umbrella. So a lot of small business owners are probably familiar with that. Anyway, your typical SBA loan is a good financing vehicle for folks that might not be able to get bank financing or want to seek it on a little different terms. So this falls under that lending umbrella, but it's geared especially towards small businesses and their ability to respond to the coronavirus pandemic. And if you want to think about it in broad strokes, it's essentially meant to be an 8 to 10 week bridge loan that lets people make payroll. So the nutshell version is that you can get a loan that is up to 2.5 times your payroll costs. And that's a defined term that's got a bunch of stuff in it. So it's not just the wages you pay employees, but it's health insurance premiums, employer contributions to retirement plans, that kind of thing. That all goes into the pot, multiplied by 2.5, and that's your loan amount. And the federal government wants you to use that to either keep your employees employed, or if you've laid them off, bring them back to work. And if you do these things, if you keep these folks employed, they'll forgive the loan. So it could be free money if you use it the way they want you to use it.
Okay, free money always sounds good, especially as business owners are dealing with trying to figure out how to keep businesses up and running when so much is up in the air right now. Who would be a good candidate for this program?
Well, we're advising all of our business clients to at least give us a call and talk about it, because this is the closest thing that we've ever seen to free money. Forgiveness aside, if you don't get the forgiveness for some reason, it's a 2-year loan bearing interest at 1%. So worst case scenario, you've got the cheapest line of credit I've ever seen for 2 years. That's not bad. But everybody should be looking at this. The SBA lending requirements for this are small businesses, which is defined very broadly. It's anybody who's got less than 500 employees. Nonprofits can apply for this too. There's no carve out for religious organizations. So I just did one for my church last week. They applied and they were thrilled about it. So there's a whole slew of people who should at least be looking at this. It might not be a good fit for everyone. The stimulus package has a whole lot of other good programs baked into it. If you do lay people off and want to keep doing that, there are good incentives to do that and not feel badly about your employees not being able to make a living wage. There's the EIDL loan program that's out there too. So there's options, but we think everybody should take a hard look at the PPP loan for the sole reason that it's free money. If you use it to cover payroll expenses, it's forgiven, and it's that easy. So anybody, regardless of size, whether you've got one employee or 499, you should be taking a look at it.
Okay, and for those who are just joining us, we're talking about this Paycheck Protection Program, or the PPP loan, as attorney Mike Zahrt is talking about here. Mike, what should applicants know before they apply?
Well, I've got a bit of a 3-point sermon here. The first is you should expect some ambiguity, and it's not something that you should DIY. It's okay to DIY the loan application and to work with your loan officer, but before you do that, you should either be talking to your lawyer or your accountant to kind of dig through the statute and exactly what's included in this payroll costs definition, because the maximum loan you can get is 2.5 times payroll costs. You think that would be easy, but in drafting this statute, Congress intended it to be incredibly broad. They wanted to help as many people as possible. And the side effect of that is a lot of ambiguity in defined terms. So we've had our statute, which we thought, and we took a plain language reading of it, and thought we knew what it said, and then the SBA issued a set of interim final rules. You had an interim final rule, but that's what they called it, and that clouded the water a little bit. And then the IRS issued a fact sheet, which was contradictory to the SBA rules. So even right now, there are certain issues where banks and lawyers, and we're kind of just taking our best guess at it. And the SBA is doing better. They keep releasing FAQs. They had a recent one out last night that clarified some of the big issues. But I guess one takeaway is be prepared for some ambiguity. What I've had to tell a few clients that fell into one of those ambiguous areas is we'll just prepare the application two ways, contact your lender. We'll see how they're interpreting it. And whichever way they fall, we'll have an application that matches their procedure. That's point one. Point two is to expect some uncertainty. This is brand new legislation, and we're still getting a lot of the clarifying rules. So the unfortunate part of this is that there's a limited amount of funds, right? They've only $350 billion is allocated to this, which sounds like a lot, but if every small business in America applies for this, it could be gone rather quickly. And that's kind of the driving force behind this feeding frenzy of loans. People are so concerned that if they wait for the clarity, they're going to miss out and the funds are going to be gone. And we can't really advise anyone any different. So what we're advising is let's just seek the maximum amount available, working with the lender that you have, and see what falls out. There's still a lot of ambiguity and uncertainty around the loan forgiveness program, how that will be calculated, which costs are permissible for loan forgiveness and which are not. And what we're telling people is, look, even if you don't qualify for full forgiveness because the rules clarify the ambiguity opposite of how we think they should, you still have a loan at 1% for 2 years, and that's really cheap money that you might need to keep your business going anyway. So that's the second part of my three-part sermon. The third is to work with your advisor to get your ducks in a row. We've noticed that a lot of lenders are just swamped. I know Huntington hired a bunch of just temporary bankers for the sole purpose of fielding these applications. There are very few banks out there that'll take an application from someone who was not a pre-existing client of their bank. And even if you are a pre-existing client, you're not going to get a ton of face time with your lender. Most people only get responses from their lender if their loan is denied for some reason. And you don't want to be in the position of having to resubmit or refine this documentation and get it resubmitted. And the better strategy is to just have your ducks in a row, have it in a nice, tidy little loan package in a single PDF. You'd be surprised. I had a few banks kick back applications just because we uploaded the document in more than one PDF. So I had the loan application in one file and all the supporting documentation in the other, and I said, nope, it's got to be all in one, resubmit. So if it's nice and tidy and clean, the idea is you want to submit it in accordance with their checklist in exactly that order and make it as easy as you can for them to breeze through and go check, 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 check on to the next part of the approval cycle. So having somebody who's familiar with the act, familiar with your books and where to find those records is helpful. Every bank seems to be different with what substantiation requirements they have. Some want a 940, 941. Some people want your payroll register. It's the same types of information, but they're looking for different documents to substantiate. So making sure that you're working closely with your advisor is the third thing that you do to make sure that you're ready with that.
Absolutely. And I know, Mike, this is a perfect example of when we're talking with small business owners or any business owner and talking about having your kind of care team in place, your team of trusted advisors that can work together when the time comes. This is certainly that time. So for those who are watching and maybe feeling a little overwhelmed, there's been a lot of, Mike and I were talking beforehand, there has been so much information coming at business owners. I feel you as a business owner, I am right there with you. There's a lot of information coming at us and being able to turn to some of these trusted advisors to help us sort through, especially, the ambiguities like you're talking about, Mike. It's so key to be able to turn to, and if you don't have an attorney, if you don't have a CPA that you've been working with regularly, it's okay. There are people who are available to help. So, Mike, I really appreciate you talking through this. What other, is there any other financial assistance available for small business owners?
Yeah, so the PPP loan accounts for $350 billion of the $2 trillion stimulus package. So there's a lot of other goodies in there too. One is that EIDL loan you hear a lot about. There was some rumors floating around when that first came out that you just fill out the application online, and 3 days later there's going to be $10,000 in your business bank account. So everybody scrambled to do that, and I don't know anyone who has $10,000 in their bank account. Part of the issue with that one is that the application for the loan does not give you the space that the Act contemplates you should have to tell them that you want the grant. So the statute says you may tell the SBA that you want a part of the loan as a grant. You can tell them how much. The application doesn't let you do that. We think that was intentional because there's only so much money for that one to go around too. So if you've applied for the EIDL and haven't seen the grant money yet, don't panic, but also don't expect it to be $10,000 because there's a lot of discretion that goes into that on the SBA end. But the rest of that can turn into a loan, very beneficial term and interest rates. You can refinance an EIDL into a PPP loan, which is eligible for forgiveness. So those are the two lending packages. The other one I touched on briefly was the unemployment stimulus. I'm sure a lot of people have seen that, the extra $600 a week that are going to unemployment benefits. So if you're in a situation where it just doesn't make sense to have the PPP loan and you got to lay people off instead, you don't have to feel as guilty about doing that. So those are the 3 federal programs available in the state of Michigan. The MEDC has authorized a $10 million grant program and a $10 million loan program. The loans are obnoxious. They're interest only for 5 years, and then repayment over another 5 years. I think the interest rate is like 1/4 of 1%, just very low. You apply for those, the grants and the loans, through your local economic development office. I'm in Grand Rapids, so for Kent County, it's the right place. But you can go to the MEDC's website. They have a full list of whichever county you're in. They have a link to your economic development office, and it's usually a landing page with an application for the grant and who to talk to about the loan. So for stimulus programs, those are the big options.
Okay, excellent. And I imagine, again, all of this coming fast and furious. Mike, I want to point out that on your website, fosterswift.com, your firm has set up a coronavirus task force, and there's a full page of resources, including links to some of these programs, information about these programs that he's talking about, and more information, some memos and write-ups from attorneys at the firm. We have a few questions coming in. I think there's a little bit of a delay in these questions. So if you're writing a question and we're not answering it right away, be patient with us and I will get to it. So first question, Mike, we have is coming from Christy. She wants to know, what would you say is the likelihood of a small business being approved for loan forgiveness?
That's a good question. The statute does not put loan forgiveness into the discretion of the SBA or the IRS. So in other words, loan forgiveness is mandatory. The government has to forgive it if you jump through all the hoops. And there's 3 hoops you have to jump through. And the whole point of this loan, again, is to keep people employed. It's the Paycheck Protection Program. So that's the idea, is we want to keep rank and file employees collecting those paychecks. So the 3 hoops are, you have to have as many employees now as you did in the prior quarter. And that's just an employee by employee basis. You do a census of employees. And if it's a reduction in employees, the amount of loan that you can have forgiven is reduced pro rata. So if you have, 80% of the employees you used to, you qualify for 80% forgiveness. The second is based on employee compensation. This is just based on salary, so it doesn't take into account any other benefits like health insurance premiums. And if you made a discretionary employer contribution to your retirement plan this year, and there's no way that's happening this year, that's fine. It's based solely on compensation, and it's a 75% rule. And that's dollar for dollar, and it's employee by employee. So you look at each employee and you compare what they made to what they used to make. And if it's less than 75%, your loan is reduced on a dollar for dollar basis. So you got to pay attention to that. And then the third thing is that you can only use up to 25% of the PPP loan proceeds for non-payroll costs. So the Act lets you use it for things like mortgage interest, utility payments, interest on pre-existing debt obligations, and it's fine to use your loan on that stuff, but you can only use 25% of your loan on that stuff. To the extent you exceed that 25% threshold, that won't be forgiven. But again, this is non-discretionary, so as long as you jump through those 3 hoops, the whole thing's forgiven. One other thing on that too that I think is important, most people think about loan forgiveness and they may think about discharge and indebtedness income. So the general rule under the tax code is if you owe somebody money and they forgive that debt, that's treated as income to you. Another carrot they put in this legislation is that you're not going to actually owe any income tax due to discharge indebtedness. So it's truly free money.
Wow, great info, Mike. Christy, thanks for that question. We have another question. This one is from Becky. She says, hi, Mike, thanks for doing this. Question, if an employee files for and receives unemployment, will this affect the employer's eligibility for loan forgiveness?
It probably will. The reason being is that if an employee is receiving unemployment benefits, it necessarily means that they've been laid off. So you've reduced your workforce, and your compensation to them is zero. So when you look at those two forgiveness formulas that we just talked about, you're going to get dinged on both of them. And the important thing to keep in mind with the first two forgiveness eligibility tests is that it's not an either or. You don't pick the best or the worst. They both apply. So if you lay off an employee, they not only don't count towards your employee census and you get reduced for that, but it's also a reduction in salary and you get further reduced by that. So there's a potential for double dipping here as far as the government's concerned in not forgiving your loan. So the whole point of this is bring people back to work, get them working, get them collecting their paychecks. So yes, if you lay them off and don't bring them back, it will impact your loan forgiveness eligibility. The good news is you've got until June 30 to bring those people back. So if you previously laid them off and think the PPP loan is good for you, you can still apply, and as long as you bring those people back by June 30, it won't impact your forgiveness eligibility.
Excellent. Great question, Becky. Thank you for that. Mike, my next question for you is kind of a loaded question. What else should business owners be doing? And is there anything that we should have already done by now?
Yeah, good question, Julia. The first goes to your point earlier. Make sure you're staying in touch with your advisors. I'd recommend and encourage all my small businesses, especially the very small ones, the folks on Main Street. Think of your attorney and your CPA and your insurance agent. Think of all those people as kind of your external board of directors. And you should be frequently communicating with them about what's going on with your business, the problem that you have. Between all those people in those industries, add your banker to that list too. They're going to have some good advice for you to help you kind of weather this and pick what's best for you. So that's advice number one. Advice number two, I guess, determine if you're critical infrastructure or if you have employees that are necessary for minimum basic operations. Those are two defined terms in that stay home order. If you haven't given them the written designations, you should have by now. There was a midnight at March 31st deadline, I guess midnight the morning of April 1st, but they need to have the written designations. So if you haven't done it, do it. If you have a question about whether you need to or not, contact your attorney and they'll help you work through that. Two other quick points. Review your contracts. If you need to declare force majeure, you're unable to perform because of events outside your control, you likely need to give written notice of that. And even if it's not a requirement, you still should do that. Again, give that to your attorney. They should be able to help you determine if you even have that option, and if so, how to exercise it. Even if you are still performing, if it's on a limited basis, or maybe you just had a phone call with a vendor or a customer and said, let's just suspend everything for a month and see how this shakes out. Get it in writing, right? If it's not written down, it didn't happen. So do that. And then the third is, really look at your day's cash. That's not something that we typically look at in the ordinary course of business. But in a situation like this, where there's a lot of uncertainty, you want to know how many days you can make it on the cash that you have. And if it's not a number that's big enough, reach out to your CPA and really take a hard look at, what invoices are due on receipt, what are not, what do you normally pay immediately that you could defer out a few weeks, and try to stretch that day's cash number a little farther. And hopefully if you do all of that, we'll see infection rates decline and hopefully see the economy start turning back around.
Excellent. Mike, and I'm going to kind of cross-promote to an interview that we did last week with one of your colleagues. Patricia Scott talked more in depth about some of those day-to-day business operations. And for those, as we try to continue this business as normal or as abnormal, however we want to phrase that, certainly some great advice from Patricia last week. So those of you watching, you can catch that in our videos on our Facebook tab. Mike, thank you so much for sharing your insights. Anything else that we should cover before we let you get back to work?
I feel like I've dumped a lot of information on people, and there is a lot of it out there. I would promote we have a one-stop shopping on our website. It's our coronavirus resource page. And the firm is a full service law firm, so we have people in a variety of niche areas, and we try to stay in our lane and only look at stuff we absolutely know. So I'm your PPP guy along with a few other people. I know nothing about unemployment benefits for independent contractors. That's a big issue. I know nothing about it. It's on our website with a link to someone who does know something about it. That's all to say, be sure to check that out. If there's, a business issue that's impacted by this pandemic, the person you should contact for answers will be on that page.
Absolutely. And that's what's so helpful about having a firm like yours, where it's, like you said, one-stop shop, so we can get those resources. Those of you watching, the website he's talking about is fosterswift.com. And I'll go ahead and I'll include a link in our comments section. Mike, thank you so much for taking the time today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yes, and those of you tuning in, if you have more questions for Mike, feel free to reach out with him to him directly through his website. And then join us back here at 3 o'clock in about an hour and a half. We are going to switch gears a little bit, and we're going to talk to a local nonprofit about how they've been able to shift and what they're able to do as far as passing it forward with kindness. Really cool things happening with Epiphany now. So I'm excited to talk with Bob Hoffman about that. That's coming up today at 3. And again, thank you for joining us. If you have questions for our guests today, please feel free to comment here or find him at fosterswift.com. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you back here at 3 o'clock.